I think I am recording now. So let's start off with Neolithic art. So we said that Paleolithic art went from around 40,000 BC to about 10,000 BC. Neolithic art goes from around 10,000 BC in certain areas to around 5,000 BC. Once you get to around 5,000 BC, we start going into the Bronze Age when people start using metals instead of stone tools. Now, in between Neolithic and Paleolithic, we have what's known as Mesolithic. Now, Mesolithic means middle. And the time period for Mesolithic is about, in various areas, 13,000 BC to about 7,000 BC. Does that make sense? But it's kind of hard to place Mesolithic stuff because it's kind of in a little bit of a transitional period. That's why I kind of focus only on Paleolithic and Neolithic. So we're moving into Neolithic art. And just know that the Neolithic time period around the Western world, especially, but also what's going on in the East is happening about the same time, is from around 10,000 BC to 5,000 BC, roughly. Oops, backwards. Forwards. Oh, there we go. Neo means new, lithic means stone. I think we all remember that, right? So paleo means old. Like paleontologist is an oldtologist. Okay, so what makes Neo different from paleo? So the determination of when the Neolithic period began in a certain area requires 3 criteria. The first criteria, domesticated animals. Note that dogs are considered to be the first domesticated animal. Not freaking cats. Dogs. They exist. Okay, so dogs are considered to be like the first domesticated animals. Oh, and they have dog burials in caves that go back a long time. And they're like all nice and curled up and loved and buried instead of hacked up and eaten. So, other things that get domesticated, cattle, goats, etc. But that happens later. And again, in various areas, it happens at various times. There could be like a couple thousand years between like when something in the Near East will develop and then when something in Europe will develop. Generally, it'll develop in the Near East before it develops in Europe. Cultivated plants or agriculture is also a marker of Neolithic as opposed to Paleolithic or Mesolithic. And then settled year-round communities. That means that a group of people settled down in a certain area and stayed there year after year after year. They didn't kind of like stay there for 6 months and then move somewhere else for 6 months. So those are kind of the 3 different things that will distinguish where Neolithic breaks away from Paleolithic and Mesolithic. So Mesolithic things, what's happening is that they might start like raising wild grasses in a certain place, but they won't have domesticated animals or they won't have year-round communities. So when all 3 of those things are present, it's considered to have shifted from the Mesolithic into the Neolithic. Okay, so now, the three things I just showed you before were what kind of categories as a group of people as being characterized as a Neolithic people as opposed to previous. Now, the next things that we see here are developments out of those three things. Having settled societies that have domesticated animals and agriculture. So surplus food arrives from agriculture, which means that you can store food. And if you can raise animals for your yum-yums, you don't have to run after them and hunt them. So these types of things with permanent settlements allowed for more societal complexity and sophistication. Basically, the ability to have those three things led to specialization in labor, whereas now, instead of everybody's a hunter-gatherer, right, you have farmers who specialize in raising crops. You have warriors who are the people that go into the next village and kill them and get their crap and bring it back to you. You have hunters that still go out and hunt big things that are yum-yums. You have leaders. There's definitely becomes a hierarchy of people. Certain people are more important than other people. And this isn't just in a small group of people, that this becomes in even larger and larger groups of people. You begin to have priests, religious figures, etc. You might have somebody who specializes in making arrow points. So you have this type of specialized labor. And then also what develops during the Neolithic period are definite religious and ceremonial practices. Because we can find evidence of that. A lot of it occurs and is evidenced in burial practices. So we have most of our evidence based around burial practices, but we do have other evidence of artifacts that we found that seem to have some sort of ceremonial significance or religious significance. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is Neolithic painting. Neolithic painting is still on rocks. That's what we have. But as we look through a couple examples that I'm going to show you, I'll just go ahead and say it's not near as interesting as Paleolithic painting. But I want you to kind of notice some differences as we're going through this, and I want you to be able to kind of articulate some differences that maybe you've noticed as we look through here. All right, the first place we're going to talk about is Janet, which is in Algeria, which is in northern Africa. Right. Yeah, that's right. And so the paintings on this kind of rock shelter or rock outcropping date from around 9,000 to 5,000 BC. And here's what we got. All right. On your card, I want you to write down one or two things that you notice about this cave painting that we didn't see in other cave paintings. There's always one. Does anybody else have any desserts that they don't want to eat? I'm just asking. Okay.
What would you say? You should have sent out an email. We all could grab a little extra.
I know. Okay, let's name a couple things that you see here that you don't really see, or you didn't see in Paleolithic cave painting.
Silhouettes.
Woof.
You see a woof woof.
Wait, what?
Yeah, it's a
I
doggy.
thought that was a deer.
It's a doggo.
No, it's a doggo. Deers don't have curved tails like that. All right, we see a doggo, right?
Yep.
All right, what else?
They're silhouettes instead of like.
Okay, they're more silhouette than outlines or volumetric forms. I think that's probably a pretty good statement.
Less emphasis on the yum-yums.
There is a little less emphasis on yum-yums.
You get the legs.
This is on the musculature of the legs.
Yeah.
They have different tools.
His feet.
Okay, what's the tools?
She has
A bow and arrow. Neolithic development. Bow and arrow. A new tool. Also, we have a definite painted human figure, right? We didn't really see any of those in Paleolithic. We have parts of them in Paleolithic, but we don't really have full figures. And this one is meant to kind of look like a human being, as opposed to a what? A mix, yeah. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention. There are, that we know of for sure, probably 25 to 30 Paleolithic burials that we have dug up and exhumed in Europe. All right, let me rephrase that. We have dug up in Paleolithic tombs, or not actually tombs, they're just kind of buried in the ground, usually in caves. About 35 or 25 to 30 people that we are buried with like warrior stuff or hunter stuff, right? About 40% of those are female.
female warriors.
Huh?
Female warriors.
Well, female hunters.
Oh.
So like, spears, knives, things like that, which would be grave goods that would go with the person. On the graves, the Paleolithic graves that they found, where they found people buried with hunting tools, 40% of them are female. Now, that definitely seems to imply a little bit more of an equal status back then. And people have basically thought that, man, boom, mine, But again, that's kind of one of the things that archaeological evidence, it's a pretty good sample size. 30 is around the minimum sample size that you're supposed to have for a good quality sample. And the fact that 40% of them, the skeletons, have been female skeletons buried with knives and spears and stuff like that. The shafts aren't there, but the spearheads are still there. Pretty much demonstrates that the women were hunting right alongside the men when they were taking down woolly mammoths and things like that. Just wanted to throw that out there. I didn't mention that in the Paleolithic time period. So we have a figure. This figure actually looks male. Got a bow. He's holding a couple arrows in his hand. He has a hunting dog. So he's on a hunting trip. Right? So we have silhouettes. We have figures. We have new tools. And where we talked only about the Birdman and the bison as being, an action movie from 35,000 years ago, what we'll find is that in Neolithic paintings, they tend to be doing active things. And it's oftentimes not even like a single person, but it'll be groups of people doing things. And they'll be doing things like dancing, or hunting. Or they'll show herds of cattle as opposed to like an individual cow or an individual bull. So you can kind of see a couple of animals. Here's a bull right here. The head of a bull. Here's, I think it looks like a cow to me. That's exactly what a cow looks like. Another one I'll show you, and I'm sorry that Jami isn't here because it's from España. Roca del Moros. And so we're towards kind of the end of the Neolithic period here in Spain. Remember, it's a little bit later in Europe than it was like in the ancient Near East. Roca del Moros, España. Okay, can I move on now? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about what's going on in here. First of all, males, females. Females, very good. Look for the distinctive bits to see whether they're females or not. Clothed or unclothed? Clothed. Well, that's different than what we saw in Paleolithic, right? Are they all female? No. Can you see a male in there?
Oh.
Yes, you can. Please don't make me draw it out. Okay, so these are called, this is like called the dancers. And you have these like female figures, and they appear to be kind of in some sort of dance setting. Now the male figure up there is holding something, but it's hard to tell what it is. It could be like a massive dead dragonfly. I mean, you can't really formulate what that is exactly. Now, this rock image right here has actually been enhanced in some areas so that you can actually see the surface better. If you're actually to look at this like the rock itself, you'll see something much more like this.
So they didn't scrape away the rock to get it to the white, they just painted right on the rock.
Yes. Okay, so you can see like two figures right about here, and this thing right about here, if you look hard. So, that's kind of after it's been enhanced, so you can actually see the figures in it. But this is kind of what it looks like to begin with. All right, so we still have like wild things going on here. This looks like a type of an ibex. Notice the markings that are also in the stone surface. We have like this right here. And we have, this cipher kind of going up here. We have a scrape right here, etc. There appears to be kind of some sort of really finely incised something kind of going like this. There's something down there. There's a lot of stuff, and this is like the rump of something. So, like Paleolithic stuff, they did have multiple images on there, and sometimes there are these engravings, but the engravings can be realistic, but they're also, again, like Paleolithic, they're oftentimes just very abstract. And this isn't an exact copy of what I showed you, but you can kind of see this ibex over here. And so that's kind of the funny thing is that it might be actually.
What's covering it, like all that, all this, all the gray? Just how the rock looks? Or is
Yeah, that's just how the rock looks. So you can take this into you can do a couple things. You can actually shoot it with a certain light, and if a certain mineral is present, it'll show up. They do that with palimpsests a lot. A palimpsest is like a medieval manuscript that is painted on a piece of sheepskin called vellum. Well, it was very expensive to do vellum, so if they ever wanted to reuse the paper, what they did, they scraped off all the other stuff onto vellum, and then they would paint or write new stuff on it. The thing is that the iron that they used in their inks actually would have a chemical reaction with the vellum, so you can actually put it through hit it with a certain light wave, and it'll show you exactly where that iron ink was at. So you can actually read things that had been scraped off of the surface of these medieval texts, and you can read them just like they were almost brand new. It's pretty cool. So what's happened is that they painted on it. This is not in a cave. This is exposed rock. Most Neolithic paintings are actually on rock outcroppings and not necessarily in caves. It's more like a place they would go instead of a place which would be kind of near where they lived. All right, so I was saying that. Go back again. Go back. Go back. All right, you can barely kind of see it, I think, but there's like an M where that kind of extends. All right. So just to recap, what are the different or the new Neo themes that we see compared to the Paleo themes? Let's articulate them. What? Community. Or bunches of peeps. What else?
Living in the moment instead of,
Activity.
like instead of just cattle or just.
Right. So activity. So like hunting, dancing, herding, raves. Oh wait, no, not raves. Maybe, I don't know. Okay, what else? Different tools. Bow and arrow. Where's the locations at?
rock outcrop?
Rock outcroppings instead of caves. Clothes.
Dogs, rules, nurturers, if that is that hurting.
New animals. Okay. Are these Neolithic paintings more detailed or less detailed? Tend to be less detailed. Like more silhouette instead of volumetric forms.
And there are like sculptures that facial features.
We actually have facial features. Did we put humans on there yet?
Humans.
Oh, yeah. Humans. And also, men. There are very, very few males depicted in Paleolithic times. You have the Birdman. If you consider the unicorn a composite animal, then you have the unicorn. And a few years ago, they found this head made out of ivory, actually in Dolny Vestonice, same place they found the clay pieces. And it's a head of a man made out of ivory, mammoth ivory. Now, the man has a really strong bone above the brow. And the thing that's interesting is that's actually not a characteristic of Homo sapiens. That's a characteristic of second famous hominid. Rhymes with Neanderthal. Neanderthal. Very good, Emily.
Thank you.
Yeah, so here's the crazy thing. It seems to be made later than Neanderthals were. Neanderthals basically start dying out around 40,000 BC. And Homo sapiens become the dominant species around that time. I mean, they don't boom, 40,000 BC, all Neanderthals died. No. It's a slow process, but they're kind of, by 26,000 BC or whatever, where this thing is dated, they're kind of like only like small populations left, if that. So the fact that they found this male thing, but they can tell it's male because it has like a beard, and it has markings that make it look like a beard, or I suppose it could be a female still. We only have the head, we don't have the other bits, but it looks more male than anything else that we've ever seen from the Paleolithic time. But we start seeing more menfolk in general now. And so I'm going to say more simplistic art.
Did they also use like the spray paint technique and stuff? Was that in video at all?
I can't say for sure that they did or they didn't. Most of the things that you see are very similar to what I just showed you. They tend to have kind of flat, hard-edged things. They're very precise in their rendering of things. They're like beautiful silhouettes. But there's also like more abstraction in them as well. So, the female figures that we were looking at, look at that head right there. Oh, yeah, these are older ones because the points of their hair have rounded off. That's how you can tell the old females from the young females.
Did they make some form of brush to make those hard edges, or how would they have done it? Do they know?
I don't know. It looks painted. It does not look drawn. And if it's spit with very, very precise, stencils.
So both of the ones that we've seen would be labeled as abstract.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, especially this one. this one's a little bit more naturalistic, and this one has some hinting of actual volume in it, but overall they just tend to be a little bit more flat looking.
They also don't emphasize the bodies that much.
Yeah, the bodies are very
They're like
schematic, you know. So, you know, triangles for heads. Skirts are like another triangle. Breasts that kind of hang down. Okay, so one of the coolest thing about, I think, about Neolithic art is its architecture. Where Neolithic societies lost a little bit maybe in their painting techniques, boy, did they sure outshine everything else ahead of it in building techniques. And frankly, it's freaking amazing what they are able to do with what they have. And all of this before the wheel is invented. Okay, so there are two main forms of Neolithic architecture. All right? The main forms are post and lintel and corbelling. Now, there is a related form that goes with this, and that's called cantilever. All right? Cantilevering is a part of what goes on in corbelling. So these are the two main ones, but just know that corbelling involves cantilever process. And so there is a small amount of actual cantilevering going on in the Neolithic period, but it tends to be part of something else. So one of the most absolute basic construction techniques is what's known as the post and lintel. It's so good we still use it today. Now, post and lintel, I think, is a little bit of a misnomer. A misnomer means that it's misnamed because post is singular and lintel is singular, but it really should be posts and lintel because it has two posts and one lintel. Now, this is why I'm telling you that there's oftentimes a little bit of cantilevering in Neolithic architecture as being part of the other two. And so this section, once it hangs over here, boy, why don't you paint in another color? This section right here, this overlap is actually supported by all this which is going on over here. And so when something has an overlap like this that is jutting out and is supported from behind itself, that's called cantilevering. So it doesn't matter if it is only this big or if it goes out this far. It would still be called a cantilever, all right? So the cantilevering that we generally see is part of post and lintel and is also part of corbelling. But cantilevering in itself is considered to be an architectural form. Yes, and this probably is the absolute worst post and lintel what do you even call that? diagram, there you go, that you can find in 5 minutes on the interwebs.
Do you have actual, like, do they have the actual?
Pictures? What, you think I'm just giving you theory here and lousy artwork? Come on.
We're shortening on that really bad.
I know, it's horrible. Okay, so here's a couple more diagrams. So the reason why I include this one on the left-hand side is because the space in between is called the span. All right? So the span is the space between two supports. And it is what the thing that is supported is covering. So in this case, the supports are posts, and the thing that's covering it is a lintel, but any space in between two supports is called a span. So that's why that one's in there. Okay, so engineering-wise, whenever you have a post, or I should say 2 posts, and a lintel on top, all of the force of gravity is pushing down in this direction towards the thing that's farthest away from the support. So in that case, in between 2 posts, the thing that's farthest away from the support is the center of the lintel. So all of the gravitational and weight stresses are being placed into the center of the lintel. So a lintel can only be a certain width before the weight in the center begins to cause the lintel to crack and ultimately to fail. So the stresses make the piece want to actually bend downward, and that causes an inward stress and an outward stress. The inward stress is at the top, the outward stress is at the bottom. And even though this is a very, very basic and foundational construction method, an architectural method, it does not allow you to span a very long distance. So the spans, or the space in between supports, is relatively narrow architecturally.
Were they big posts and lintels or smaller or
They all do the same.
No, like, were the ones that they constructed bigger or smaller or like something?
They're big. Big. So big. Yeah, that's the fun part. Oh, okay. Tensile strength. I wish I remembered for sure. Tensile strength is the resistance that something has to bowing and breaking. So the tensile strength of something is how much kind of weight it can support before it fails in between 2 supports. All right, here we have the temple of something in Chichen Itza. Chichen Itza is a Mesoamerican civilization. Anybody know if it's Incan or Mayan? I think it's Incan, but I can't know for sure. Mayan crap's usually in better shape. She's usually looking it up.
Hold on, I'm with mine.
Mayan! That's what I said. Mayan.
By my people, you will know.
Okay, so post and lintel. You see the posts? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. You see the lintel?
Yes.
Ah.
How, what, the rocks have patterns to them.
They're carved.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
They're not naturally like that.
Well, yeah, I figured.
Yeah.
How big is that? It's like,
That is like that's probably slightly less than man size. You probably had to scrunch down to get into it. But you could fit a human in it.
Do we have a date on it?
Somebody does. This is not Neolithic, so
Oh, okay.
this is just an example. Mayans is way, way, way later than this. Yeah. Okay, so I should probably write that.
they don't know how many.
Not Neolithic. Neolithic. Just example. Mayan. Okay, so we'll go over corbelling. I am going to show you actual post and lintel construction from Neolithic period, but I want to go through the actual things first, like corbelling and post and lintel first. All right, you guys have a great weekend, and I will see